Hey folks, it's Q&A time, back here on the Dark Horse Podcast live stream number 26 with Dr. Heather Hying.
And Dr. Bret Weinstein.
That's us. All right, shall we Q&A?
Yeah, let's Q&A. We're going to start with 5 that we missed from last time. We missed a number of them in the middle due to a technical glitch. So we're just going to jump into 5 before we embark on the ones from the previous live stream today, and then...
Technical glitch as opposed to emotional glitch. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, at the point that Zach and I both were pointing fingers at each other, we thought it was an emotional glitch, but it turned out to be a technical glitch and not user error on either of our parts.
All right.
At least that's the conclusion we've arrived at. All right. So for Q&A number 25, we got this question. Hi, Bret and Heather. I'm an 8th grade teacher searching for advice to pass out to my students who are incredibly weary of the world they're growing up in, especially now. What advice would you give? Now, in part, I wanted to just flag this as something that, we've got a whole chapter on schools and another one on childhood in the book that we're writing. But this is a critical question, and maybe you want to riff for just a minute.
Yeah. I mean, I think really for all of us who are searching for a silver lining here, you're looking at me like I'm about to joke. No, I'm going to do my best to actually give some sort of useful solace. I think really actually this is true. And this is what I tell myself, and it's what I would tell my kids if they asked, and it's what I would tell your kids if they asked. The potential for change is directly correlated to the level of disturbance. And so to the extent that we find ourselves facing very uncertain things in the near future, it is also something that will tend to accompany a transition to something better. So in evolutionary terms, this is an adaptive valley. Whether there's a peak on the other side, I sure hope there is, but the potential for change is here, as is the uncertainty.
All right. It's the beginning of an excellent answer, I think. No, I think we need years to provide the complete excellent answer. You've provided directions to the foothill.
We need years. We have hours.
Next question, again from number 25 rather than today. Drugs are always a controversial subject. Some are considered medicines, others controlled substances. I think if it helps someone, it's considered a medicine, period. What are your thoughts about marijuana, fungi, and psychedelics? #legalize nature. So this is something that we have addressed a few times, but because it came at a high money value from someone who clearly hasn't heard us talk at all about this, I thought we'd give it a minute or two.
Sure. So I would say number one thing is these things can be very useful. They can be a tremendous relief. They can provide insight. I would say number one thing, though, is don't treat them as recreational. They are very serious, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a great time and have a smile on your face as you do, but treating them as frivolous is a mistake. They are powerful enough to do great things, and they are powerful enough to mess you up if you don't, I would say, curate your experience such that it stands a good chance of being productive. But if you think these things aren't for you, they probably aren't. If you think they might be for you, engage cautiously. Think carefully about the damage you may do to your health. There's a difference between the molecule and the way it's delivered. In the case of marijuana, you can mess up your lungs if you smoke it. So maybe consider doing it some other way, which is now much easier than it once was. But a cautious, positive view of these substances and their potential, but advice to engage them carefully.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add the hashtag that the person who asked the question ends with, #legalize nature, is an apt one. That at the point that something has, even if it's been derived from a plant, but synthesized in a lab such that it has no resemblance at all to the plant or animal, or more often fungus, from which it derived, the more likely it is to do you harm and to have very little resemblance to the state that it might have produced if you were imbibing it from the organism in which it came. So, you can use that very broad rubric, that sort of rule of thumb to say, okay, avoid those things which require that you stick a needle in your arm or snort powder up your nose, and know that there is both long evolutionary relationship between humans and many of these species, and maybe more importantly, there is long cultural history. Not for most of us within whatever sort of mutt-like aggregate culture that we come from, but for many, many cultures have a relationship with entheogens in particular. And learning from what other people have learned from their use of hallucinogenic plants and fungus mostly is an important first step, and it can be incredibly valuable to do so yourself.
Yeah. But don't lick a toad without consent. I would say written consent is probably safest.
So let me just say that on the very first time that I had students in the tropics before we were at Evergreen, I had just been hired on to teach a tropical animal behavior class at a little field station in Panama. I heard tell that some of my students were licking frogs, and I had to give them a hard time because these were not even the right toads.
Oh, goodness.
They were not the right toads at all. And I thought, if you're going to seek these sorts of experiences out, at least get the organisms right.
Yeah. Licking frogs and taking names.
Yeah. Okay. So just a huge, this comment meant a tremendous amount to me, so I wanted to share it. Just a huge thank you. I'm a conservative Christian, and I can't tell you how much I value your podcast as a gut check against my echo chamber, because you both seem like intellectually honest patriots. Thank you. Really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, and we obviously don't know much about you beyond your comment, but right back at you.
Yeah. Have you guys actually been to CHAZ CHOP? That's what it says, Zach. Zach's laughing in the other room. Have you guys actually been to CHAZ CHOP? Yankee Marshall, a YouTuber, has done a few live streams there. He's showing something completely different than what we're seeing on social media outlets. I recommend coming through the footage. So I have not yet, but I thought it was worth mentioning that here. Do you know of this YouTube channel?
I've seen some. I don't know that one in particular. What I would say, though, I've certainly considered it. It's not especially close to us, so it's not like, if we lived in Seattle, I would have been there for sure. But the problem is there may be, I'm sure there is, and I've seen lots of footage that suggests reasonable stuff happening, all sorts of moments in the CHAZ CHOP. But, we've got 4 shootings. We've got video of white people excluding other white people from lawns so that the experience of black people can be centered on a lawn. I mean, the point is, look, is there insanity in the CHAZ CHOP? There is insanity in the CHAZ CHOP. Is there reasonableness? Probably a lot of it. But the fact that there is enough insanity that it is easily found and filmed tells you something about how reasonable the whole experiment is. Also, I would point to the fact of them excluding the police from a shooting at the same time that they demanded the paramedics come in. You can't run a society this way, right? Either you're prepared to have the police and the paramedics there, or you're deciding to provide those services yourself. And so anyway, this is at some level, this is an absurd exercise, and it has revealed exactly what many of us told you it would.
Yep. They have at least done us the service of allowing us to call them the CHAZ CHOP. So that's something.
Right.
Okay, final comment from the Livestream 25 rather than today's. And a number of people pointed this out, that actually while we were on air last time, apparently Jonathan Herzog just announced his support for DarkHorse Duo. He is running for a congressional seat in New York District 10, apparently. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting and important and good.
Yes, there's his support for the DarkHorse Duo plan, which will probably soon get an official name in the neighborhood of Unity Ticket. But we are also supportive of Jonathan Herzog's support of the DarkHorse Duo plan. It seems only fair. And supportive of Jonathan Herzog. I don't mean to joke with you. Just, it helps pass the time.
It does.
It does.
All right. Moving on to to questions from the last hour. Thank you. This is just a comment. Thank you. The IDW has been a godsend for me. Be that as it may, it doesn't look good for the home team. Yeah. What is the significance of singing in humans? Why do we have two distinct registers? Why can we do this? And then there's a link which we didn't have time to look at, so I'm not sure what exactly the question is asking. And why is it so emotionally stimulating? Love from Scotland. So I'm not sure exactly what the two distinct registers is referring to either.
Male and female are an octave apart.
Is that? We obviously have overlapping ranges. It's a rare man and a rare woman who have no overlapping ranges when we sing.
We have overlapping ranges, but that's the variance.
But there's nothing else around two distinct registers. I thought it might be like a vocal fry or like a. No?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I take it to be male and female. So let's put it this way. You've asked a very deep question, which would require a book to answer, but let me simplify it a little bit. One, the distinction between singing and music is a new one. So it would have been true until very recently, until the invention of musical instruments, that music was inherently vocal and in general contained lyrics. It was inherently lyrical almost all the time. It would also be true that basically every intact human would have a direct relationship with music. They wouldn't just consume it. They would participate in the creation of it. And music wasn't static. It used to be that even the songs that your tribe sung were songs that changed over time, right? So even the standards were never the same twice. And then at some point, the invention of the player piano, songs start to be the same twice. And then that gets really bad in the era of recorded music.
Oh, but it's far before that. At the point that music is being written down in the Baroque era, you have repeated music.
Oh, you have repetition. You've always had that, but the idea of exact repetition
I think that at the point that the Baroque era was upon us, or maybe even earlier, I know far less about what came before the Baroque, but we know what could have been and was being played over and over and over again from Bach would have been 1600s, I think. So repetition has been going on for as long as the written word. Frankly.
So you think music has been Baroque far longer than I think it has, but no.
I just walked into that one.
Yeah, you did. You set yourself up. Yeah. Let's put it this way. There is something to be said about the player piano being the first point at which the song might be the same twice. But I agree with you. Written music does invite the attempt to produce the same song twice, and a conductor might do the same rendition twice. So anyway, they'd be very close. But all of it is a departure from the natural state of music, which would almost always have been lyrical and would always have been vocal until, the invention of the first musical instrument. So the point is, the answer to the question is really going to be found in what is the evolutionary advantage of vocal music, right? And I'm going to leave you hanging there, but I would say one of the things you need to recognize in order to address this puzzle is the close connection that music has to the production of language. And anyway, I have a long-standing hypothesis here which needs to be explored at some point. But.
Yeah, we should devote an hour or more to this at some point. But this one thing that just occurred to me, which had never really occurred to me before, is that as you know, I was trained in classical piano, played for practiced for a couple hours a day for many years during my childhood, and so the Baroque period sort of happened, and I don't know a lot about what exactly happened before then, but Baroque was during, in part, the era of clavichord and harpsichord, where there wasn't dynamic possibility. You didn't have the ability, as you did with the pianoforte, which was the thing that changed about the keyboard, was that now you could play softly or loudly, right? And it was very much, as I understand it, the Baroque led to the classical period, and in both of those cases, yes, the musician who was playing the music could change what was being played, but you really weren't supposed to stray. And at least for someone playing individual piano music from the Baroque, like Bach, and then the classical period, Beethoven, Brahms, Haydn, etc., were very much supposed to be played as they were written. Whereas then you move into the Romantic period in the 19th century, like Chopin and Tchaikovsky and such, and you suddenly get a lot more freedom again. Sometimes they'd stuff so many notes into a single measure that you could just, do kind of whatever you wanted dynamically and metrically. And it was almost like a return to what music was before I feel like the sort of the drum, the metronomic enforcement of things from the Baroque period happened. And I don't know what all that was about, like why that happened.
Well, I mean, I think you're on the right track in the sense that the elaborateness of the instruments and in the case of the harpsichord in particular, the mechanistic nature of the instruments invites a more mechanistic playing style.
So you think the technology may have driven the musical style?
Yeah.
Anyway, none of which almost is about singing, which is its own. It is the original instrument, of course.
Yep.
And amazing. Okay. Next question: jury nullification. Yep. We lawyers, those who are even taught the doctrine at all, are taught to ignore it. How long can this Pandora's box be kept closed? Do we pry the lid ajar by even asking the question?
Well, it's been asked, and this isn't the first time. If you haven't heard us talk about it, I know Eric has talked about it. Jury nullification, for those of you who don't know what it is the ability of a jury to decide that even though, so courts do two things: findings of fact and findings of law. So in a court, you establish what took place, and then you decide whether it was a violation of the law. The jury has the ability, the capacity to neutralize the law part. In other words, it can decide that you did something, and it can reason that even though it was a violation of the law, that it is going to rule as if it wasn't, thereby freeing you, right? So this is in some sense a protection that exists in the law, because we can all imagine extenuating circumstances in which a miscarriage of justice would occur by the application of the law. So the fact that a jury could potentially do that is a protection. However, basically, my understanding is that judges instruct juries that they do not have this right, and the hope is that the right will effectively never be exercised, because the mayhem that could arise from its exercise is massive. And in this case, we have the near certainty that many things that are violations of the law, and severe ones, will not be penalized, because we are told that certain people are in debt and others are in surplus, and therefore, it's one more place where reparations can happen. Your right to violate the law may go up if you have certain demographic markers. That's a very frightening prospect. Even more frightening is the prospect of the other thing, which maybe it has a name, must have a name that I just don't know, which is where somebody who has not violated the law is going to be convicted because of some sense that they are morally deserving of being punished. And I am very afraid that both of these processes
are jury proactive. No, it's not proactive. What is it?
It's like activist.
Jury activism,
or it's legislative jury activism. I don't know what you would call it, but the idea that juries will effectively be empowered to punish people who haven't done anything wrong. I mean, for one thing, we're seeing the equivalent of that without a jury in these cases where people are getting fired for not having done anything wrong.
Well, I mean, you know much more about the law than I do, but given that it's findings of fact and findings of law that are the two things that a jury is supposed to be deliberating on, don't findings of fact have to come before findings of law? And if the findings of fact say there is nothing that happened here, do you even get to move on to the findings of law?
Oh, no, it's right. I'm not an expert here either, but yes, effectively, the facts either have to support the possibility that there was a violation of law or not. So a jury that wanted to could neutralize this in either place. It can decide that a fact that
it could come to an untrue conclusion on the findings of fact front, thus opening up the possibility of a punitive decision over in findings of law territory.
Right. And of course, the judge is supposed to be the fail-safe mechanism, the judge that finds the jury engaged in deliberations that it shouldn't can declare a mistrial. But, where in the system is anybody immunized from being accused of racial wrongdoing in the modern era? So everybody is going to start recognizing that they might need to do what the mob demands. And that is, as I keep saying, it's the uninvention of America. And wow, are we in danger if this keeps going?
Yeah. Next question. Can the emotion of awe unite us back again?
That'd be great. And I like the idea. I'm a little bit concerned that something about modernity has made us hard to impress.
Yeah. Right?
That we are all privy to the most extreme demonstrations of capacity and beauty, and we've all been transported to the most marvelous beach on earth,
which has furthermore then been photoshopped.
Right. So yeah,
we all imagine that the perfect beautiful person and the perfect beautiful place and the perfect beautiful everything is not only something we've already experienced, even if we haven't, but that it's actually better than it is, such that when we do experience true awesomeness in our lives, we often don't recognize it as such because it doesn't live up to the unphotoshopped, unperfected version of itself.
Yeah. That said, I do think that there are things that will galvanize us or could galvanize us. And one of them, I am hoping, is the possibility that there is a way out of this that will, in fact, make us feel good about ourselves again. And I am a little bit concerned that, unfortunately, I find myself in trying to write what that would be like. It is very hard for me to deal with the word hope now, because I feel that the Obama administration was such a disappointment in terms of what it accomplished that
many of us felt his hope. We signed on, and then we're quickly disappointed.
It has almost poisoned the concept of hope, and that leaves us grasping for synonyms that are never as good.
Yeah, this is interesting. I didn't know you were thinking on this, and I know what you're trying to write right now. But I actually went looking specifically. I was looking for something to read at the end of the last hour that would be hopeful, rather than so much else. And I must have a pile of 10 books downstairs, all of which I think are extraordinary. And I couldn't find anything. And the closest I came, actually, but I don't have something to read from it, was from Joseph Campbell. I went to the Hero with 1,000 Faces, in part because we were talking about one of the things we were talking about between this live stream and the last one was the hero's journey, and trying to reveal to people that they can take hold of that for themselves. And that in trying to face this thing down, it is not sufficient to take individual action, and yet it is, in many cases, the only thing that is possible. And
well, I would like to propose something that we didn't get to in depth today, was a deeper exploration of what you do when it comes knocking, and maybe
we want to do that next time. Where
I think we want to do it next time, and we want to take the time to do it right. But there is something, I do have the sense that the world is a much bigger place than it was, and the hero's journey is simultaneously, it contains a great deal of truth, but it also may be at the wrong scale. And so the question is, can we figure out how to scale it up to a world with 7.5 billion people on it that is simultaneously in crisis? And if you think about that, it's a frightening question, but it's also kind of a delightful opportunity. And so maybe that's where we are, is we're trying to bootstrap the new twist on the hero's journey because we need it.
Yeah. Next question. While there are many domestic issues going on, I'm concerned that international issues are being ignored at our risk. Would you please have General Robert Spalding, retired, on the podcast? He wrote a very revealing book recently about the Chinese Communist Party.
I'd look at it. I agree. I think we are missing the international component of this as we are hobbling ourselves at home. Our enemies are licking their chops. Yeah. There's no question about that.
And the fact that half the country has the sense that anything that comes out of the president's mouth is inherently wrong and ludicrous, means that for Trump to have said anything about Chinese involvement in this virus means that half of the country now has a knee-jerk reaction to ignoring that as a very possibility.
It's a great example, right? We can't even talk about the facts of what this virus is and where it came from because Trump has taken a position, and that causes others to be completely unable to hear even factual information.
Yeah, it's anti-intellectual.
Yep.
Why are yawns contagious, in quotes? Are they similarly contagious in other primates? Do you think ideas expressed before a yawn might piggyback on the yawn to be spread more effectively in a group? Oh, wow. That's so interesting. I don't know. I never thought of that.
Well, I don't know about the last piece.
Yeah,
I did have a kind of a riff on yawns, but it's been years and I don't have it at the tip of my tongue. There is, I think, something about state of mind, and that effectively yawns are something that spreads because it's like a feeling of security sufficient that sleep would be acceptable. And so you can imagine a pride.
So it could be an indicator of trust even.
Yeah, it's an indicator of I perceive that this is secure, and that spreads to the group. And so anyway, that raises all kinds of questions, and it maybe predicts certain things about the way it functions. But it is fascinating. And yes, it is contagious in multiple different kinds of creatures. Now, I wondered at the time that I was working on this whether it was contagious between types of creatures, which would be very interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't remember whether there's any evidence.
Yeah, I have never seen an analysis of that. Anecdotally, it doesn't really look like it. When we've been watching, wild primates, for instance, and they go on a yawning bout, it doesn't seem to track into us or other things. Or when our cats start yawning, it spreads through them, but doesn't spread to the dog or to us. But that's that's anecdote. But I would put money on, but not a lot of money on, the idea that actually that has not been looked at.
Yeah.
Cross-species contagion of yawning, but within species contagion, yes. In at least some other primates, and seems to be at least domestic companions.
It's interesting how widespread it is, though, which suggests one of two things.
It's only mammals.
Still widespread.
Yeah,
right. But the question is it convergently widespread, or is it ancient and we've all inherited it from some yawning ancestor?
Mm-hmm. Some yawning tree shrew.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, next question. Do we need to make it costly for every coward that throws their towel in with either extreme, especially in media, academics, and power? Let everyone know now we will not forget. Reason will prevail. We will remember those who betrayed it. We will not forgive. So that's it's a good question. It's just a little hard to read. Do we need to make it costly?
Yes.
Yeah,
and in fact, that's why we have this term and why we use it.
What term?
Coward. If you look back in the various tapes of us talking, we have spoken frequently about the epidemic of cowardice.
Yep.
That is a message to those who did not stand up and to those who are looking at them to figure out what to do, that is not the honorable position. And the problem is, what you cannot do is tell people, stand up and it will be safe. So the fact is, the cowardice is really about something. But yeah, turning up the heat on cowardice is the right move. You have to do it honorably, but especially, what I would say is actually the cowardice that I am least sympathetic with is cowardice of people who can afford to do something else. The cowardice, for example, at the head of the Democratic Party is despicable. Mm-hmm. And it is, I can't say it's criminally treason, but it is in effect treasonous, because we're going to destroy the nation in an effort to let those people not say what they should full well understand. So yes, turn up the heat. I would say, though, your last, I'm not seeing it, but
we will not forgive.
We will
remember those who betrayed. We will not forgive.
I would not say that. I would say we don't know where this comes out. And frankly, if we don't forgive anybody who has made an error in this era, there's going to be very few left.
Yeah.
Right?
So we will not forget. We will remember.
Yep.
But we will not forgive is maybe a bridge too far.
Yep, I think it is.
Okay, we're going to get through at least a few more here. For one thing, we started with some questions from last time. Do you follow Slate Star Codex? That's not quite spelled right. I think it's called Slate. What is it?
Slate Star Codex.
Yeah, Star, right?
Yep.
Any thoughts on the New York Times doxing Scott Alexander and the resulting deletion of his blog? It's abhorrent. The New York Times fucks up again.
Yep.
Sorry, we're not supposed to do that on this show.
How you fucking dare,
yeah.
New York Times. No, it's despicable. And first of all, you know what? Hey, we've got a podcast. There are thousands of people watching. There's also a petition. Many of us have signed it.
Yep.
That you should sign to ask the New York Times not to dox Scott Alexander, as if that needs to be stated, but apparently in this era it does.
So let's just say I was thrown because there's an extra letter in there that caused me to misremember. So it is Slate Star Codex. It's a long-standing independent blog on all manner of rich and dense and intriguing intellectual topics that is written under a pseudonym to protect the identity of the author, who it turns out is a clinical psychologist, for whom, if his identity were suddenly to be revealed, the damage, yes, to him, for sure, but especially to the mental health of all of his patients who would suddenly be faced with knowing all of this backstory on their therapist, would be extraordinary. And to what end? The New York Times doesn't even have a justification for threatening to reveal his identity. There's no journalistic justification at all. And we can't point you to Slate Star Codex now because the person who writes as Scott Alexander has now taken it down. It's really horrifying, actually. You go there, and it's just not here.
Let's put it this way. Here, the coup has knocked a singular property off the map in one move.
Yep.
Right? So this is telling you what this horizontal coup is going to do to us, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to take out that node in one go is just stunning. Is it Slate Star Codec? I can't remember now.
Yeah, I now can't remember.
Seen it 1,000 times, but anyway.
Exactly.
I'm sure your search engine.
Well, actually, I can
find it. Codex with an X.
So that is right. It's just not start. Yeah. Okay. Does Mark Antony always win over Brutus? Does the DarkHorse Duo need a Mark Antony and or dogma to succeed?
No. First of all, I don't think anything is necessary. I think we're in a brand new spot and people know we need help. And so anything that checks the boxes of does it solve the problem, does it address my concerns, does it put me in jeopardy, is capable of doing the trick. So narratively speaking, what is the best way to get there? That's a question, and I don't know the answer to it. But I don't think this is a matter of hitting the narrative perfectly. I think this is a matter of the system is so broken, and the solution it's handed us is so inadequate, and the danger is so great that many people have ears to hear if we can deliver them a version of the plan that is clear.
Heather, in one of the earlier live streams, you mentioned that vitamin D supplementation isn't the same as getting vitamin D from sunlight. Could you elaborate on this? Thanks and much love to you both. I can't say a tremendous amount about vitamin D in particular, but the logic is this, that our modern reductionist approach to health tends to focus on finding, isolating, quantifying, and then prescribing in the form of an actual prescription or just over-the-counter pills, the thing that is now imagined to be what is keeping you from health. And this is, it is reductionism that is the flaw here, and also a kind of scientism sensu lato, wherein a scientific approach allowed for the isolation and naming and quantification and synthesis of this thing, but no one took a step back and looked at the whole system, which is inherently complex, and said, okay, what is the value of this within the system, and does it have interplay with other parts? And of course it does. So we have any number of examples in which something has been isolated, and then it turns out that that is not the thing that was actually necessary in the way that we thought it was, but it was something that was easily found, easily named, easily pointed to, and then turns out in isolation doesn't do nearly as much good. So it's possible that some of these will actually work in isolation. It's possible that vitamin D supplementation is just as good as getting it through your skin. But I would put the chances of that close to zero. Just as well. So you're gonna.
Well, I was going to say we have a lot of these cases where the problem is you're using the logic of simple systems on a complex system, and so, for example. Why am I blanking on the name for the loss of calcium from bones with age?
Osteoporosis.
Osteoporosis, right. In the case of osteoporosis, well, there's not enough calcium in the bones. Obviously, give the person calcium. They don't metabolize it. Why would that be? Well, you're dealing with a complex system, and the whole reason that the calcium is lost from the bones in the first place isn't what you think it is. So the simple fact of dumping calcium on the system doesn't work. So
now this is a perfect and pure example. Osteoporosis is caused by lack of calcium. Therefore, just add calcium.
Right.
No, it's an evolved system. It's not going to work that way. Will occasionally a system work that simply? Maybe.
Sure.
But the vast majority of these things aren't going to work with simple supplementation. There's an excellent book, which we refer to in our book, which is reminiscent, which points out some of the error in this kind of thinking. And I've forgotten the author, but it's called The Tyranny of Metrics. And it's a short book. It's really extraordinary. It points to how this kind of reductionist pseudo-numerate thinking has managed to finagle its way into medicine, into education, into all sorts of places where it has no business being.
Yep. And in this case, we moved indoors. That blocked the sun. We produce vitamin D through contact with the sun through a kind of photosynthesis. And supplementing is not an excellent way to replace it. Now, there are modes of supplementation that do seem to work that involve things like fish oil. But these are cultures that have a long history of having had to supplement because of very cold winters, for example. So the simple lesson,
very high latitude. So like cod liver oil turns out to be a way to get the equivalent of the vitamin D that you need,
right,
which was a discovery by Scandinavians and Vikings, not because they knew they were looking for that thing, but because those people who ate a lot of that food survived better.
Right, they did, and they may have carried some mythology along with.
I'm sure they did.
What it was, but the simple thing is when you disrupt living systems, you invite consequences you don't see because these systems are complex and there are things you don't understand about how they work. So the idea that you can just simply blaze in there and remedy them with the obvious technological fix often doesn't work. So, go in the sun, avoid sunscreen, don't get a sunburn by taking little breaks in the shade. That would be, I think, the best, most useful advice.
Yep. Given the status of things, is there any genuine recourse aside from networking and massing militias? I like being hopeful as much as the next guy, but we know what this is and where it goes for the helpless.
Well, yeah, there are. It kind of depends where in civilization you stand, whether you have useful things to do. I think there are important plays to make that could take this disaster and turn it into something useful, but I don't know any of them that don't involve an outbreak of leadership in which reason becomes a capacity of this movement. So,
are you hoping for an epidemic of leadership?
I don't know that I'd call it an epidemic. Yes, I am hoping to see leadership emerge, and I am despairing of the fact that it does not seem to be doing so. But I really hope it doesn't. The militia answer, how can this be anything but a disaster? It's going to be civil war, and I don't even know, at least in the case of the first Civil War, there was a geographic distinction so that, there were at least outcomes that made some sense. I don't know what outcome emerges out of a civil war here that makes any sense. Who do you divide from what? Or is it just a bloodletting, in which case, can we not figure out how to avoid doing that? I'm stunned that we are here, even though I have long thought it possible. I'm stunned that it has happened.
It's still surprising when it shows up.
Yeah.
Seeing strong selection pressure for traditional... Okay, let me see. This is written sort of telegraphically. Seeing strong selection pressure for traditional gender roles in antiquity, compensation for high child mortality and low life expectancy, etc., I look for the same regarding anti-homosexual norms to no result. What am I missing? Can you parse that?
No. I'll try again.
I can't quite parse it. I'm just going to read it as straight as I can.
Okay.
Seeing strong selection pressure for traditional norms. Start over again. Seeing strong selection pressure for traditional gender roles in antiquity. Parentheses, compensation for high child mortality and low life expectancy, etc. End parens. I look for the same regarding anti-homosexual norms to no result. What am I missing?
Okay, I'm beginning to get what that question means. I
sort
think
of.
it has to do with homosexuality removing people from the breeding population in a way that mortality would be expected to, right? And so this person
Okay.
is looking for some sort of cultural compensation. I think in some sense this is missing. This is going. We've been threatening for so long to rent a hall and unleash
This person is trying to get you to give a 30-second teaser.
Okay, the teaser is: look, homosexuals were always there, hiding in plain sight, and the role that they were playing was an important one. So, the reason that you do not see the expected compensatory cultural mechanisms is that what has happened is a disruption of the normal phenomenon of homosexuality as it exists in culture after culture. So at some point, it will be possible to rent a hall, and I would like to rent a hall, and I would like to deploy something other than a cryptic hint at what might be in that logical quadrant. But
all right,
we're not renting a hall today.
Nope. Okay, this next one is just a comment. I tune in live when possible. Always listen to YouTube uploads. Thank you for keeping true dialogue and dialectic alive. Thank you. Hey, Heather and Bret, from your firsthand experience, do you guys think the end game and ultimate goal of the critical race theory and affiliated studies and movements is some variant of African American independence? I think there's a faction that may be trying for that, but I don't think it's actually dominant. I think it's more about amassing power and wielding power over all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. I've heard of voluntary separatist movements.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, how do we? Even if you thought this divorce was smart, and I think it's stupid, but if you thought this divorce was smart, what does it look like?
Right.
We're not geographically separable. Frankly, we're not even separable as people because the intermixing has been extreme, to our credit.
Yeah. But I mean, this person isn't saying, could we do it? This is the end game and the ultimate goal. Do some people over in critical race theory and affiliated studies hold that as a goal? I think some do. I think, they're desperately confused about what it means. But I think that it is a factional perspective.
Yeah, I think it's mostly mythological. But anyway, yes, there will be those in the movement, but in some sense, the movement is a set of incoherent demands, and let's see what sticks is kind of the approach.
Yeah. Okay. Just a couple more here, and then we'll go into the next live stream. There is a time asymmetry in reasoning with spurious arguments. By answering madness with reason, are we putting ourselves at a game theoretic disadvantage? Maoists use dirty tactics. Will we be outcompeted by playing fair?
Great question.
Yeah.
I don't think there is a mechanism to win by playing deceitfully. I think it will break down into madness more quickly, and that in some sense, the only option is to respond to the madness with reason, and then to try to amplify the protection for those who recognize the reason and abandon the absurdity. Mm-hmm. So there is tactical stuff to be done, but it does not involve coming up with our own Kafka traps. That's just not going to work.
Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to do the last two at the $20-ish level before switching over. Okay, and there's a couple in the tens that I really wanted to get to, so maybe we'll start there next time. This is my first time listening live. Thank you so much for doing these. Have you heard the news coming out of the UK regarding dexamethasone as a treatment for COVID-19. Do you have any thoughts on this from a biological perspective? I have sort of vague glimmerings of this, and I don't really know much
Don't know yet.
more. And so no thoughts yet. Presumably we will have more at some point if it lives as a news item and doesn't just disappear because it turned out to be false, as so many things in the COVID-19 era are happening. Okay. I like the hashtag DarkHorse Duo plan, but worry that many sympathetic voters would still vote for their preferred lesser evil to avoid the spoiler effect. Do you think a vote pairing app or website could be useful in mitigating this?
Well, let me tell you.
Yes, I knew you wanted to get to that one.
Yeah, we have put a lot of thought into the spoiler effect issue. And what I can say is, as we reveal the plan in all of its glory this week, you will see that there is a failsafe built into the plan so that it cannot act as a spoiler. This is one of two major objections that people have, and we have a structural fix. So, on the one hand, I don't think you need an app to deal with that. The failsafe does not require an app. That said, I do believe there are things that an app could be very useful for in this plan, and then, frankly, building out the plan so that the proof of concept can extend to other offices, not just the office of president. So anyway, I'm very keen on the idea of a sophisticated app that will form the basis of a retooling of our democratic process to make it work according to the values spelled out in the Constitution, which I should point out does not mention parties.
Okay, starting at, we hope, the first question that came in the current live stream. We have a comment. Keep up the good work. Everyone chip in a few dollars. Thank you. Next question. Can Black trans women get more intersectional points for converting to Islam? Yes, I think they can. We'll see that coming soon.
All right.
Yeah. Being wired, this is from Echo. Being wired to like the smell of people genetically related to us seems to give incentive to socialize and reproduce inside lineage. That is, preserving gained immunity. Many people move from ancestors' niches. Is this still relevant? And then a follow-up question, if we all wear Maoist perfume, will we get along?
So let's just say this is a tough question, right? There's a question about what society we would like. And one thing that people advocate for is a society in which we actually do stop taking racial distinctions seriously and we blend into each other, and that's great. The problem is there may be genetic reasons that your genome doesn't prefer that, which are not actually relevant to your person and what it would want. And then there may be reasons that your genome doesn't want it because it's actually in some way costly. So let me just say, you have different things in tension. On the one hand, you have a tension towards breeding with people who are closer to you in all probability, and that does not have to be genetic. It can be transmitted culturally as well. And then you have a force pulling you away from breeding with people who are too close. And then you have another factor, which I would say is, and again, this can be genetic, it can function culturally, or a combination of the two, which is hybrid vigor. So to the extent that one has certain things that function very well in one population and other things that function very well in another population, a hybrid may carry the values that exist in both those populations to one individual. So it's a very complicated puzzle, and I don't think we have a deep understanding of all of the nuances here. But let's just say we are constantly being jerked around by our genomes. We are being jerked around in our actual interests. We're being jerked around in genetic interests that we should not honor. And then we are being pulled in directions that we don't understand because they may contain values that we are unaware of. So let's not oversimplify it is really, I guess, what I'm getting at.
Are we memeing ourselves into oblivion?
Yes.
What memetic? Next question. What memetic should be stressed to self-correct?
I mean, the problem.
Just stop it. Yes.
The problem is we have, because memes, which came into existence with Richard Dawkins' Chapter 11 of The Selfish Gene in 1976. That's where the concept came from. The concept was a scientific concept until it became an internet concept that then got kind of trivialized by what we all call memes, which are cute little GIFs and things that have text associated with them or whatever. And the problem is, in some sense, there's a lot of stuff that actually at a technical level is clearly mimetic. These podcasts are clearly mimetic. And so there's a whole landscape of podcasts that are actually trying to sort out difficult issues rigorously at, in a long form. So that is us struggling through a mimetic landscape towards reason. And it may be the answer to the insanity that arises in a world of people, hurling trivial memes at each other. So, yes, something in the mimetic landscape is probably the answer. Good.
You're up next as well. What are the primary, very significant disagreements that you and Sam Harris have?
There are a few apparently. One is.
Or are they growing?
Well, I think a lot of things trace themselves to a few roots. Okay. One has to do with determinism and whether this could be a fully deterministic universe. Another one has to do with free will, and I think that the free will discussion is contingent on my being right about the determinism question. Mm-hmm. If it's a deterministic universe, I don't even know what free will would mean. If it is a non-deterministic universe at some level, then free will is possible. Sam says it isn't possible.
Yeah, so there are philosophical positions that allow for one without the other. It seems incoherent to me, but I've seen it written.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've seen it written, and if it was in a deterministic universe, I don't know what that would mean. So right. Anyway, there's that. And then there's this question of panpsychism, which I don't know where he falls out today on panpsychism. But panpsychism, the idea that consciousness, because it is seemingly resistant to rigorous explanation by standard means, must therefore, in some sense, be written into the material that the universe is constructed of, which I find preposterous.
May even predate matter.
Right. So anyway, I would say those are the biggies. And the funny thing is, in some sense, I don't think almost anything important depends on these things because, frankly, Sam...
He's very careful to argue that regardless of whether or not he's right, you need to behave in an honorable and ethical and moral way.
Right. Sam lives like a guy who doesn't believe in these things, and he would probably tell you that. So, so in any case, there are some disagreements. They're probably worth sorting out because these are actually important philosophical questions, but probably nothing depends on it, which is why Sam and I get along in spite of our differences.
That's right. This from Holly Math Nerd. Why is transgender identity, even without transition, celebrated, but transracial identity is considered an appalling appropriation of oppression, not your own? Thank you, Holly. It's a great question.
Well, and in fact, I've now forgotten the woman's name.
Is it Tuvel?
Was it Tuvel?
No, it's a different.
We had an academic famously canceled over making exactly.
I can't remember who it was. It might have been Tuvel. Anyway.
So. Yeah. Somebody made this argument in an academic paper. Didn't make the argument pro or con, but basically said, is this analogous? And a firestorm erupted. So let's put it this way. The reason that we don't notice that inconsistency is because we have completely given up on the idea of consistency as a virtue.
Yeah. Our people wolf is back.
Yes, our people wolf is back.
Now
and wagging,
carrying a large donut in her mouth.
Off my chair.
It's totally incoherent and inconsistent, and it reveals the hypocrisy of the field, the scholarship. And if you could point that out to an individual, it reveals maybe not their hypocrisy, but if they don't think on it and get back to you and say, I see that I have to accept both of these or neither of these as in order to remain consistent, then it suggests very strongly that they are not working from first principles, but working from received wisdom.
Yep. And if you can just do a thought experiment here too, it's possible.
Oh, no.
No.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to try not to get us in too much hot water, but it is possible that a person could transition from white to black so long as they took up an aggressively, I don't want to say pro-black because I don't think this movement is pro-black, but an officially sanctioned pro-black position. But if you were to imagine somebody transitioning John King style, to black and taking up a skeptical position of the movement, it would not function, which tells you something about where we are, that what is permitted is no longer about logic at all. It's about what you plan to do having done so. And anyway, that's not how logic works.
Right. You will be required to adopt these ideas if and only if you also agree with this over here. Otherwise, you are prohibited from doing so.
Yep.
Have you guys considered any question submission systems besides Super Chat? I vote with my wallet, and I can't stand the thought of YouTube taking a 35% cut. Yeah, it's egregious, isn't it? I'm a software developer. I would be happy to build you a custom one. Well, Kyle, let us see if we can figure out how to be in touch with you, because yeah, so Zach is saving that for us, and that would be great, because being more free from YouTube would be terrific. And obviously, if you guys are donating to us, it would be great if we got more of that money and YouTube got less. They're getting plenty as it is. They've soft demonetized now your conversation with Eric,
Yep.
and your conversation with Yuri Dagan.
Yep.
John McWhorter has remained unsoft demonetized. That might look racist if they were to soft demonetize that one, so they didn't.
I actually think they did it. They soft demonetize almost all of them reflexively, and then I have to appeal.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there is no...
So we're basically, I mean, there's very little money coming in from ads, so most of it's from Super Chat.
We're at their mercy.
Yeah.
We're at their mercy, which, it's just absurd. There's nothing to appeal to. There's no analog of a court. There's nothing. It's a company town.
There's all these people who were indoctrinated in the latter-day adherents from the schools of ed.
There you go.
Yeah. So we will we'll follow up with you. Thank you. Next question. I'm an author. The children's book industry has become highly political, and activists are greatly influencing who publishes what through various methods. Any suggestions on how to push back without getting canceled? Thanks. Yeah, we talked about this a little bit on one of our earlier Q&As. I haven't noticed children's literature, although I recently spent some time at Powell's in the YA section, the young adult section, and it's devastatingly bad. How to push back? There are little glimmerings of hope some places at some publishing houses with imprints possibly trying to create a buffer for authors. I don't know if any of that is happening in children's literature or YA literature, and it also that's not, of course, the first thing that would-be authors run into. The first thing you run into is the agencies, literary agencies. And when I went looking for literary agencies, three and a half years ago for science fiction, I was amazed then at how many code words, how many woke and intersectionalist code words there were in almost every agency that I looked at. So it is, I don't even know, even if some publishers get smart to this, how do you do an end run around agents, given that most publishers won't even look at a proposal from you if you don't have an agent?
I think it's the wrong question.
All right.
The fact is, you have an ideology. It is logically incoherent. What are the chances that every university in the country would find itself enthralled to it? There's zero. There are lots of us who know what's wrong with it. So what happened? Power happened. There is something powerful enough to take every university and turn it in this direction, right? That is going to be true were it true that there was a publication that resisted this completely, it would be wildly popular, right? Because people, they don't need yet another Vox. They need something that speaks in a different voice. And so the fact of the absence of the alternative view in some sort of standard form tells you that what's really going on is something very, very powerful that is capable of taking every property, and it will. Right? That's what we're facing. So in some sense, looking for a strategy, how in a world where this seems to be very widespread, do you accomplish X? The point is, no, if you accomplish X, then you're going to become the thing that it has to go after in order that nobody can accomplish X. So in some sense, we have to fight this thing with an understanding that it is in some sense a a spreading ideology that infects everything, a horizontal revolution, and that the idea, how could you construct a platform that wouldn't have this happen? If you did, they would have to find a way in, and they will. So trying to navigate it as an individual, effectively hopeless. You can leap off into, this podcast is an independent voice, and it's an independent voice because the tools to simply put something into the world and have you directly reach it exist. But
we're still at the whim of YouTube to some degree, right? And I was going to say, within the book publishing industry, being able to self-publish became a thing that has not nearly as much negative connotation now as it did 30 years ago, 50 years ago. It would have been impossible, really, 100 years ago or so. But I think independent publishers are still basically dependent on Amazon, right? I think that then is the arbiter of whether or not you're woke enough now. And I see, for instance, that, and this is not a self-published book, but Abigail Schreier's new book, which is on trans rights activists, specifically and the contagion that's happening to teenage girls, has been somehow vanished from Amazon. And she's got a publisher. It's not, I don't remember. Apologies, Abigail, if you're watching. I don't remember if it's one of the the big 4 or 5 publishers, but it's an extant, reputable publisher that's been around for a while. So it's not just her fighting Amazon, but still they're losing. So it is possible, and yet we're all still going through some portal that does have an ability at any moment to say, actually, no, I don't actually like what you're saying.
It's choke points is the problem. It will ultimately come down to Google is a choke point, Amazon is a choke point, your ISP is a choke point, the credit cards are choke points, and this thing is in all of those places. So it cannot resist. Now, there is a question about why a podcast like this is tolerated, right? And what we don't know is if you duplicated this and you tried it, if you didn't have our following and our friends, the things that we have accumulated in the time since Evergreen blew up, you might be able to drive us extinct without anybody making a fuss. And it may be that the thing that allows us to say what we say is the fact that the cost of taking us off these platforms is too high. It would put them in too awkward a position. So I don't know the answer to that question. I certainly do frequently feel Twitter's thumb on the scale. I feel Google's thumb on the scale. And there's no telling. The Slate Star Codex example is a case where the coup went too far. It went after a property that actually a lot of important people were paying attention to. Yeah. And so now they've got an awkward situation on their hands. But that, do you want to live in a world where the only people who can say true things are people for whom it becomes really awkward when you toss them off the platform or dox them or, put them through a struggle session? Yeah. You don't want to live in that world. You want to live in a world where we are all protected from struggle sessions because struggle sessions are wrong.
Yeah. You're right. Over an hour. Okay. Well, we'll get through a couple more of these. Can we please address the gender gap in college education and graduation rates? What does it mean for our nation's workforce and for family life? So the gender gap that the person is referring to, obviously, is the inverse of one usually invoked, that we have, I think it may be closing in on 60-40, 60% of college actual undergrads and I think graduates are now female, and the gap is growing. And it is certainly, it is skewed differently into different degrees across different disciplines, but it is real. This is something that Christina Hoff Sommers has been on for decades at this point. I think it may be something that we talked about with her and Peter Boghossian on stage when we were on stage with her here in Portland a couple of years ago, and that's online. We can link to it here. I think that we talked about this a little bit in that event. But what does it mean for the nation's workforce and for family life? It's going to be deeply destructive of it. because you've got more men than women without college degrees going forward. And in the past, having a college degree was the thing that you needed to move into the middle class. The college degrees are less and less valuable now because of what we've already been talking about with regard to what's going on in the academy. But they still have this sort of badge of success about them. Many women are going to only be looking for mates who have an equivalent or higher level of that kind of badge. And so there's going to be greater competition for men, which is going to cause greater failure of families as men see that they can choose among the women who are valuing them. It's chaos across the board. And there's no reason to expect that there's no reason to think this is in any way good. Just celebrate. I feel like some people are celebrating this, but what is certainly happening, even if that's not true, no one talks about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have on a few occasions, but the only gender gaps that we are allowed to talk about are the ones in which women are still lagging, even when all of the trend lines look like those gaps are going to even out very soon.
There's something petty and deeply nihilistic about what we are seeing, and they just simply go after that which works. And anyway,
yeah.
So.
I mean, it's boy. I hope there's nothing to, but maybe there is something to the observation that higher ed is becoming a cesspool of irrelevance, exactly as women are acquiring more and more power within it. It is a disaster.
I didn't say it. I'm not even sure I heard you say it.
No, I guess you didn't. Raz Simone for president. Wow, that was not my phrase. That was the next question here, which
president?
is
Oh, come
president
on.
of the CHOP CHAZ.
No,
it's a total disaster.
Supreme overlord, maybe.
Yeah.
Depending. I think
head Dalek.
Well, look, the thing about warlords is they would have to duke it out. So,
who's going to be the competing warlord then?
Well, that depends. We need some different autonomous zones. Each one will have to have a little battle for warlord, and then as they meet, we'll find out. You're looking.
I didn't hear you say it.
No,
I don't
didn't.
think even you said it. Okay. Shouldn't Marxism be treated the same way Nazism is treated in academia and elsewhere? Shouldn't funding violent revolutionaries be treated the same as funding terrorists and those assets seized? Wouldn't those two changes end all of this?
No. So first of all, I hate this because I don't want to be defending communism. I will make the same point that always gets me in trouble, which is that there is a critique inside of Marxism, which is not so easy to dismiss. There is a plan, which is crazy, that we know doesn't work. And I would argue that actually somehow in this discussion, we are missing the central fact, which is that the world's most boring conversation, which is about whether or not group selection is an important evolutionary force, is the key to understanding why Marxism, when translated into communism, does not work. So somehow we are going to have to get up to speed on why this plan, every time it evolves, and it doesn't have to come from Marx. You can have people reinvent the plan and decide, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we all pointed in the same direction, redistributed everything? That plan is not going to work. But I tell you what, I'll give you something tantalizing.
Ooh.
The body is communist. The body is communist in the following sense. From each, according to his ability.
The human body.
Everybody.
Okay, this isn't a political statement you're making.
Nope.
This is an anatomical and physiological statement. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, go.
From each according to his ability to each according to his need. That's how the body works, right? Okay. Why does it work?
Yep.
Because all the cells have the same genome. They have no reason to disagree over this plan, right? So the point is, altruism is built into the way you structure it. Why won't that work with people? Because our genomes aren't the same.
Until a forest is not communist. A tree is communist, but a forest is not.
Correct. So if you understand that, then the point is, listen, you communists, you've missed this important biological fact. Do you want to get us to all point in the same direction? Do you want well-being to be widely distributed? The answer to how you do that is through enlightened self-interest and cooperation. It is possible. It is possible to build that system, but it will not be communist. That's not how you will get there. That thing is unstable. And the reason that you get gulags and other forms of oppression traveling in tandem with this mode is that the failure of it to work forces you to re-incentivize things for people. In other words, what causes people to behave in a communist way is the threat of death or being imprisoned and all that stuff. We don't need to go down this road. We've discovered it already many times over. Let's not rediscover it. Do you want to redistribute opportunity? I'm all for redistributing opportunity, right? But if you get stuck in the redistributing wealth conversation, you're never going to get there, right? Opportunity should be broadly distributed. Any honest capitalist should tell you that, right? They want opportunity broadly distributed if they're honest, because that's the way the maximum amount of good stuff gets done, right? When you have people sidelined, people who have incredible capacity, and they're sidelined cleaning somebody's toilet, that's a waste. That's somebody who might have invented something awesome, who's doing something that, a robot should do, right? So distributing opportunity broadly, great. But let's build it on a foundation that makes some sense, and that involves known things, right? Cooperation that is based on enlightened self-interest.
So one of the key misunderstandings then is that the body, be it a human body or a tree's body or whatever, is effectively communist because all of the cells and systems in that body have shared fate. This is the concept this is maybe one of the concepts that I find most important from evolutionary biology, that they have shared fate, whereas the trees in a forest have some shared fate, but not wholly shared fate, just as the people in a village or a town or a nation cannot have fully shared fate, whereas all of us on the planet do.
Yeah.
Right. So we have a planetary shared fate, but that's too big to regulate at the same kind of level that we need regulation and good governance and effective governance at the more local scale. But bodies can act. Individual human bodies are effectively communist in a way that corporations and towns cannot be, because there is incomplete shared fate between the members.
I want to add something to the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Shared fate is very important, but frankly, I'd argue nationally, we have shared fate, right? If we wreck the nation, we're going to be collectively screwed. But there are two things that work in the body's favor in establishing corporal communism, or whatever you would call it. One is the shared fate. And the other is the complete absence of conflicts of interest.
I put that under shared fate.
They're distinct, right? You can put a bunch of people who might have conflicts of interest in a rowboat, and they might still have shared fate if it goes under, right? But the body, by having a genome that accounts for every cell, means that your liver is more than happy to surrender whatever resources it needs to make your heart function, because it would be suicidal not to.
Okay.
And so
the notable exception, of course, being cancer.
Well, and cancer is basically, I won't say this in every case because there are cancers that are contagious and things, but in general, cancer, if it functions the way we think it does, is incoherent. It's like renegade cells that frankly don't have an interest in being renegade because they create a tumor that, yes, it grows, but it's a dead end. So yes, the body has an overwhelming reason. I mean, the body cooperates to get the gonads into a position that they can actually produce some next generation. That's the game. But they have every reason. Your liver doesn't want to freeze out your eyes. It wants your eyes to have everything they need to make them work great. So anyway, yes.
Yep.
That's the analysis.
That's great. I've been consistently, annoyingly, sharing the Evergreen doc by Mike Nana. But next steps? Will the IDW band get back together? We need leaders, but we also need direction on how we can best support this movement on our own. Didn't your brother say he was getting the band back together?
I believe I retweeted that very thing. Yeah, it sounded like he was getting the band back together. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. As I've said elsewhere, I miss IDW. I think IDW was doing very important work. I think it needed to evolve into a next phase. And maybe it has, and it just hasn't been correctly understood. But I do think, boy, it's time. We're in such jeopardy, and what we really need are people who can say the difficult things and live to tell the tale and demonstrate it, and then it needs to spread. The ability to do that needs to spread.
Yeah. I first learned of you on Joe Rogan after our kids in Catholic school in grade 8 homework asking how to decolonize the Canadian military, and grade 4 being told boys have periods too. I have watched and read all of Jordan Peterson, Eric, Bret, etc. Thank you two very much. So there's not a question there, but yeah, decolonizing the Canadian military, and in grade 4, that's what, like a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, 9-year-old being told that boys have periods too?
Hopefully what happens is all this garbage is going to backfire, because even kids that young are going to begin to detect that the adults who are talking to them have no goddamn concept what they're talking about.
But that's, I mean, at best then, we end up with an entire generation of traumatized children who never had effective adults in their lives.
I mean, look.
And, and this in Catholic school.
We're going to
have... Like we expect other kinds of ideology perhaps to be percolating through Catholic schools, not this.
Okay, here's the thing. I think it is a mistake to imagine that somehow we're shooting for a world in which children are not traumatized. We're all traumatized, okay? We are losing the thread of the conversation. And the point is, look, trauma in isolation is bad. Trauma gives rise, though, to the ability to do the extraordinary, the unusual, the unexpected. And so if we could start thinking about the fact that modernity is actually traumatizing every child, can we turn that trauma into something valuable? Can we turn it into independence of thought, into a high capacity? I mean, the way we joke with our kids has trained them to spot bullshit, right? Right? Like it's every day. It's a 24-hour-a-day training program.
Do they know.
They know how to spot bullshit. And really actually some high-quality bullshit. But the point is...
some not so high-quality bullshit.
Oh, yeah. There's
You got to mix it up.
Right. You don't. But in any case, somehow we need those people who get it to understand that they have a responsibility to convey, to indicate to kids they encounter, hey, kids, you may be hearing some bullshit. It'll be coming from surprising places. It's not always in advertisements. Sometimes, it may be your teacher. And, you'll know the teachers who really know what they're talking about. Because for one thing, they're the ones who will entertain your questions and give you back an answer that sounds like an answer. Mm-hmm. That's a good way to recognize a good teacher. If your teacher punishes you for asking questions, if they spout back something that sounds like nonsense and you can't figure out what they said, that might not be the best teacher.
That's right. Okay, let's get one more question. We get a couple of thank yous. We have you need more bandanas if we're going to hold up a train station. This is my contribution.
I was thinking stagecoach.
Okay, let's do 2 more here. Do you think, since a lot of this started in literature, that starting with how we view stories might fix it? I'm not sure it started in literature. I think it started in pseudo-scholarship, but certainly it's taken over a fair bit of literature. And I do think that taking back myth and narrative and generating narratives that we can get behind will be an important part of this that we don't. But one of the things we'll probably talk about next time, I'll just allude to a little bit here, is that one of the reasons that we, in quotes, are at disadvantage is that there seem to be a lot of compelling narratives in the form of viscerally compelling anecdotes on the other side, and for the most part, the rejoinders that make sense are, in fact, these dispassionate, careful statistics based on actually at the population level, this is what is happening. And statistics are never going to be a good rejoinder to a good story. Humans operate emotionally at the level of stories, so we need to have good stories that we can tell.
So I'm going to take a slightly different tack. I agree that this is fundamentally important, and you have pointed to the importance of high-quality narrative many times. I'm going to argue that the failure of narrative is one in a cluster of failures that are crippling our ability to be decent to each other and to move forward. That there is a junk version of everything. right? We are being induced into junk narrative because we think that the purpose of narrative is entertainment. I'm not arguing that you shouldn't be entertained by narrative. I hope you are, but that's not its purpose, right? We are being induced into a junk version of sex because we are told that the purpose of sex is basically getting off, right? I hope you get off, but that's not the purpose of sex, right? The purpose of sex has a lot to do with bonding, right? We are told that the purpose of drugs is a thrill, to pass the time.
To escape.
Right, escape. Nope. These are very serious compounds that tap into the deepest parts of your mind.
And the
right?
most important things are also often fun. So
Right.
when you say serious, just so you're not misunderstood here,
Right.
when you say serious, you don't mean it's going to be hard work and it's going to feel gray and you're not going to enjoy it. Like,
Right.
No,
No,
it doesn't need to
the
be
point
any
is
of that.
the fun is nature's little reward to get you to do the work. That's the thing. The work is rewarding. It's supposed to be, but it's not. The reward isn't the point. The reward is the thing that gets you to do the work. The point is the product of the work. And music, again, we think that the purpose is to entertain us. We don't even realize that we've lost track of the fact that you're not supposed to have your own music in your ears and everybody is supposed to be able to pick the thing that, tickles their mind just so. We are also supposed to have a shared musical.
It's supposed to be bringing us together and not driving us further apart.
Not just bring us together, but it's supposed to be, in some sense, synchronizing the way we think around the same linguistic structures, around the same melodies, and that those are powerful and important forces that we just unhooked, not even thinking about what we were doing. And so, you got music, drugs, sex, all the important stuff. We've been given a junk version, and we need a narrative. We need to resurrect the functional version, and the product of doing so would be a great deal more satisfaction. We are pursuing satisfaction directly, and we are getting less and less of it, and pursuing a higher quality interaction with each other over these things would have exactly the opposite impact. And it couldn't possibly be more important.
Yeah. One more question. Thank you, guys. Your perspectives have changed my mind in many ways. So, do you think life will ever go back to what we knew? Or should I start to adopt a new normal, as much as I hate that term?
Yeah, the old normal's done. I think we know that for sure.
Yeah.
It's impossible to imagine we go back, even if things formally went back to allowing you to interact the way you once did. I think we're all a bit rattled at what we've now seen. We've seen a threat to our way of life, and this is true no matter who you are, no matter which side of this divide you're on. We've seen a threat to our way of life. We have seen people open up possibilities that we didn't realize were near at hand, and we've also seen that things can sneak up on us. COVID-19, I increasingly believe, is a self-inflicted wound, but to the extent that a self-inflicted wound can emerge from someplace half a world away and, bring us to our knees, we should have been preparing for that all along. It wasn't a secret that it could happen. And the fact that we didn't, and the fact that it's done this to us, and the fact that it may have unleashed the social unrest, all of these are evidence of what it is that we're not paying attention to during so-called normal times. So in some ways, normal is over, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, here we are.
I think we did it.
I think we're there. Thank you all for tuning in. We will be back in all likelihood on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, we'll have our private Q&A tomorrow at 11.
Private Q&A tomorrow at 11. And like, subscribe, share, tell us what you think, and we'll keep doing this. Be well, everyone.